minute to get everybody in here. But I'd like to thank you. If you don't know where you are right now, it's 20 Tips for the Accidental Marketer with Gail Gilland and as our presenter today. Before we get started, excuse me, I got to introduce myself. My name is Dan Hendy. I'm the Education Manager here at the Pocono, at the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society. That's a past job. Anyway, and I'm happy to be with you here today. Before we get started, there's a couple of tips and logistics I want to go over with everyone. You will be able to unmute yourself because this is a Zoom meeting format, and this will allow participants to engage in discussions if needed. However, if you are during the actual meeting and when Gail is presenting, would you please keep yourself muted to eliminate any kind of background noises? That would be most appreciated. And then this recording, a recording will be made of this presentation, and a copy of this recording will be emailed to all participants for your review later on for a limited time. This webinar has also been approved for 0.1 CEUs or 1 contact hour. At the end of the program, a link to a CEU quiz will appear on your screen. After completing the quiz, you will be awarded 1 CEU credit and a notice will be sent to your email address. Make sure you take the quiz immediately following the presentation. Okay, I'm going to go back. Oh. And I'm going to unshare. So a little bit of background on who we are. The Pennsylvania Rec and Park Society is the principal statewide association providing professional development, advocacy, industry resources, and support for those working and volunteering in the field of parks and recreation. We provide our members with the latest research and trends, legislative alerts, technical assistance, and many professional development and networking opportunities throughout the year. Thank you for being here again. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Gail Gilland is an author, presenter, and founder of the Legacy Recorder. She has a passion for storytelling and has worked as an independent consultant for several different organizations. As a speaker, Gail has presented on topics such as project management, social media, storytelling, branding, and critical conversations. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you all to Gail and take it away.
Hello, I'm very excited, slightly nervous, so just bear with me. Okay, so I'm Gail. I'm going to do a little bit about me in a hot second. So this is 20 tips for the accidental marketer, and they're really 20 things I wish I knew when I started in online marketing, and I'm going to tell you why. So I'm originally from Arizona, which is why I threw in the Grand Canyon. And the way I feel about marketing is that we're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and kind of shouting into a void and hoping someone, the right person, hopefully hears us. And that's really how I felt when I started in the online world like 10 years ago, when we didn't have things like Canva and all of these really awesome tools and techniques and methodologies and people who really, really know what they're doing. So that is really quick intro. So the other way I think about marketing is that we're throwing pebbles. So I like to think of every piece of content that you put into the world, whether it's a conversation you have in person, or if it's something, a tweet, if it's a Facebook post, if it's an email you send. It's a pebble that we're throwing into a really big body of water, and we're starting our ripples with the people that hear it first, and then they tell someone else and they tell someone else. And at some point the wave crashes over the right person. They go, oh my gosh, I need that. And that's literally marketing. And when you come into it not knowing what kind of rocks you're throwing, you don't know how to skip things yet, you don't know what your waves will look like yet, it really kind of sucks. So as we're going through this presentation, if you feel like you already know all the things that I'm talking about, I challenge you to think about how I'm saying, like what I'm saying, and look at it through the perspective of what you've done so far and see if there's things you can tweak, improve, and leverage and I always feel like we're always learning something. So I've been in this for a long time. I've watched the landscape change. I've watched it improve. I've watched it get way noisier. And we can still find the people who need us. And you can still connect with your ideal client. You can still do all of those things, even when it feels like you're just sort of throwing pebbles into a really big body of water. So with that, we'll do some fun stuff. Few things to know. There's not a magic easy button. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing this, every day something changes. Facebook decides to change what the dashboard looks like. Twitter decides they're going to add to fleets and we still don't know what they are. LinkedIn has stories now, you still don't have to do those if you don't want to. So just remember it's always changing. And my biggest tip on trying to find that magic easy button is don't look too hard, but find a few resources that curate and contain the information you need to serve your clients, customers, and your brand better. For me, that means I'm following companies like the Social Media Examiner. They have really great tutorials. They keep on top of everything. They have a weekly show. There's a couple other ones that are really awesome, but I like to suggest people start with Social Media Examiner. It's kind of overwhelming. So just remember that every website, most every website, will have a search bar. And if they've done their job, you can type into that search bar and find the thing you need, because they'll have tagged it. When you're looking at your own brand, we'll get into this more. Think about what people are searching for as you're searching for things, and think about what people are looking for on your site and in your content. Okay, so creating your systems and processes and your strategies, they will take time. If you've already been working on them, awesome. Like I said before, as we're going through this, just think about where you can maybe improve or throw something in that I suggested, or if you have a light bulb moment, write those down. If you haven't started creating systems and processes and those things, don't worry. I have a whole section dedicated to workflow. The last point I want to make is that being intentional will make all the difference. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake, if you put the wrong word in, if you forget a period. Yes, when people blow up the comments, it sucks. It'll be another day tomorrow. We edit, we move on, and then you do whatever your boss suggests. So that's the other caveat I want to put. So these are all things that I've learned over the years. The big disclaimer is that I don't work for anyone else. I'm self-employed. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a freelancer. So I don't have a full-time job with benefits or a boss I have to answer to. I answer to my clients. And so I've done my best to make sure that this presentation is within the framework of people who are working in an office situation. If I say something that isn't going to jive, totally get it. See how you can fit the concept and the theory into what you're doing and into the parameters of what your work is looking for. Any questions on any of that before we move on? No? Good.
Gail,
Okay.
I forgot to mention that if folks have questions along the way, they can leave them in the chat box and I'll make sure that they get heard.
We're doing 3 big sections. So we're going to go over customer, company and brand together, and then workflow. And after each section, I will stop and say, hey, does anyone have any questions? And we're going to check the chat box. Okay, so let's keep going, maybe. Okay, your customer. Oh, your customer is your universe, okay? They're who you talk to when you write content. They are who you're thinking of when you're brainstorming your editorial calendar, or who you're thinking of when you're picking a graphic and creating all the things. So just keep in mind that the thing you do for them is awesome and amazing, but the person who matters and the hero in this story is your customer. It's not you, it's not your company's thing, and it's not your company. So we need to know our customer, right? We need to figure out which door they're walking through. We need to know their pains, their pleasures, their hopes, and their fears. This means a lot of listening. Most companies already have this pretty well in hand. The only thing that I would add to probably your existing processes is that the generations are changing, and how you're reaching those generations are changing, and the things that millennials care about is different than what Gen X cares about, than what the other, older generations care about. And how we talk about those things are actually different, the words we use. So a lot of this knowing your customer is understanding what language they're using, so that when they're reading a Facebook post, they're reading a tweet, they're reading a landing page on your website, or they're reading an email, that they can see themselves. It's a tall order, because if you have lots of different people reading your stuff, it might be that you aren't focusing on their demographic. If you've followed any, I'm not going to drop names, but if you follow things where they say you need to know where they, like what color their shoes are and how old they are and where they live and where their kids go to school, like that customer avatar, that is important. But if you base all of your content around that, it's not going to work. Understanding what they need, what they want, what they think they need, what they think they want, and figuring out where your value proposition fits in there. That's where the magic really starts to happen. So, knowing your value proposition. I thought this was a fun picture, because it's that, are we saving them time or are we saving them money? It's usually one of the two. We're either saving time, we're saving money, or we're making them feel good from an entertainment perspective. So for each piece for your company, my suggestion, if it isn't already, is writing it down. And if you aren't, if you're the, you are the marketer. So as the marketer, if you aren't sure what your value proposition is, go find someone in your company who knows. And listen to each person's answer. I always think it's fun to survey and ask my immediate superior, ask your immediate superior, ask a colleague, ask someone below you, ask a client, a customer, ask someone who's giving you feedback. Hey, what value do you think I provided you? And that's your value proposition. It's also the thing that sets you apart from the person who's giving the same service, who's providing the same product. What differentiates you from your competition? And this all comes into marketing, because knowing your value proposition means that every piece of content means you are potentially sharing that value proposition. You're always creating content within that lens of, why do they care? Why should our customers hire us? Okay. My biggest one, Facebook isn't the only way to reach people. Okay. There are so many options. It's just one of, like, yes, people are there. Understanding, and this comes back to some of what we're talking about with knowing your customer. When you're doing that listening part of things, identify where those people actually hang out as consumers. So if you are a B2B company, chances are you're going to reach people on LinkedIn, but those people on LinkedIn still are on potentially Facebook as users and Instagram as users. And that content needs to be different. We'll talk more about this in the next section, but content being repurposed as the exact same thing to every platform usually doesn't work, depending on your company. So you're going to have to sort of sort through that on your own. But just the wording is different. LinkedIn tends to be more professional. Instagram is more visual. Facebook keeps changing, but is really text-based and then visual. Whereas Instagram, they see the graphic first and then there's text. So the graphic has to get them on Instagram, and then the text, you get them to read the text, and then they do the call to action. Facebook usually is text, graphic, call to action. And then LinkedIn is generally relationship based already. So with LinkedIn, you're looking at how your existing relationship, it's usually driven by an existing relationship, and leadership positioning. So if your company is a leader in your industry, you'll probably get better engagement on LinkedIn. And I'm over here checking the chat box. Parks and Recreation. Yes. So, okay, because you brought that up, and now I'm thinking about it. Mary, can you put in what, just one example of who your customer is, and I will work to frame within that.
I will add in the chat box, BJ says it's an airport.
And is it a small airport, or are you a commercial airport, or are you serving people who are coming in and like putting their planes in hangars and coming in and out? Those are all contextual things that are helpful. Okay. So for email marketing, I own a co-working space on Main Street in Butler, Pennsylvania. And I actually don't, I just set up the email list because I have so many things going on that I wasn't thinking about the email list. But the important thing to know about your email marketing is that it's the only thing you own. So it doesn't matter how much engagement you get anywhere else as a marketer. Your email marketing is your direct line of communication. And even if it's just giving, even if you're just giving updates as to what happened at the last event, even if you're just giving information on the next events, those are all pieces that someone who's following your platforms and engaging with your content may want to know. Okay, chat's gonna get distracting. Dan, we have to look at the end because I'm gonna lose my train of thought.
That's fine. We will,
Okay.
at the end, just let me know.
Okay. So even if email marketing, you don't feel like it's important, not that it's not important, but if it's not applicable to what you're doing, brands who are interacting with your brand are most likely sending you emails. So when someone sends an email, it's an opportunity to start a conversation. When you send an email to someone, you are trying to start a conversation, especially with the email marketing. So as you're writing things, keep that in mind. And then if you see an email from a brand that potentially you could have a collaboration with, or you've always wanted to have them come and present, or you want to have some sort of partnership, find something in the email that stood out to you and respond, because the person writing that email probably is also an accidental marketer, and letting them know how much you enjoyed something and, hey, we've always wanted to blah 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 blah, is a great way to start a conversation. So if you think about email marketing as like the first hello, and sometimes a second hello, think about saying hello back. That's not going. Okay, so for copywriting is really anytime we write anything. So copywriting isn't a magical, mythical creature that's out in the world somewhere. Anytime you write a Facebook post or a tweet or an email, or you create a flyer, all of that is copywriting. Anytime there's words on it. Knowing your audience, which we already talked about, their pain points, and then using the word, literally the word you. It will change your copy in a way that if you haven't before on a flyer written, like, you're invited, or this is for you, just having that, even if you don't quite get everything else right, the person who wants to be there will see themselves in it, as long as they feel like you're talking to them. The only place you wouldn't necessarily have you is like on your brand's about page, because it's literally about your brand. But anytime you are writing Facebook posts, LinkedIn posts, including the word you will make a world of difference. My arrow key isn't working. So I want to talk about clear call to actions, which is also called a CTA. So if you ever see anything that says CTA or add CTA here, it's a call to action. There should be a call to action for every content piece. Content piece is a brochure, a flyer, business card. Basically, it's telling them what you want them to do next. Because if they've read the thing and they're sitting there going, well, what do I do now? They need to know exactly where to go. And more people will engage in a meaningful way if they have clear direction. And for a simple Facebook post, maybe it's, hey, watch for the next Facebook post, or like this, or comment this, or share on an email. It could be, respond to this and let us know how you thought about that last event. What could we improve? Maybe it's a survey. Those are all clear call to actions. Having too many can get things kind of muddled. It's just really important that whoever you're engaging with knows where to go next. Okay, before we do all of that, Dan, let's look at the chat.
All right,
Um,
Gail,
yeah.
Mary just pointed out that not everyone is a park and rec professional, and BJ works for an airport, and he's hoping to obtain private charters at our airport. So he has customers and other folks noted in the park and rec agencies, sometimes they don't consider them customers, but residents. But I will say this, there is close to 70 people on this webinar, and the large majority work for park and recreation agencies. So, we're looking at trying to attract people to your programs and services, and the social media that goes along with that. And so I think you're on the right track, Gail. And hopefully some folks can adapt what you're saying to their particular situations.
Okay. Thank you.
And trying to get people outside. Very good. Thank you, Mary.
Yes. Trying to get people outside. Well, I live in Pennsylvania too, and it's not fun outside right now. As a user, I don't know that. So, okay, clear call to action of something that just happened this week is we were getting there were only 99 spots available for a ski lift thing in Allegheny County. And I think it's through Parks and Rec. I'm not sure. But you had to create an account in order to buy the ski lift ticket, which is totally cool. I'm fine with that. I tried to go through the process and then it didn't work, and the sign up thing, and so I missed the spot to be able to get the ski lift tickets. So from a user experience and clear call to actions, that I think anytime we can go back and think about sit in the brain of our user, our person that you want to come to your event, you want them to come engage, think about the process they have to go through in order to come there. If they have to look too hard for the flyer, they're not going to look. If it's there's like, it's like 7 touches, except it's really more like a bunch more than that now. It used to be 7 touches to make a sale. And your sale maybe isn't money, but it might be signups, it might be volunteers, it might be event registrations. If they have to work too hard to do any of those things, they're not going to do it because there's just too much going on for people. So everything I just talked about is really like addressing those pieces in that customer journey. And I will try to stop using the word customer, but the person's journey who you want to see at your thing and engage with you, they have to work to engage with you. And the harder they have to work, they have to really want to hang out with you if they go through more than like 10 steps to register for an event or try to find a flyer. So leveraging platforms and having events listed in multiple places with the correct information, with multiple use, people are, I guess the other thing I didn't really put in here was that almost everyone's looking at things on mobile. So if you're creating an 8.5 by 11 flyer and it's a PDF and the font is this big, people are looking at it on their phone. And if they have to work too hard, they're going to just go. And I think that's where this marketing piece really fits in for nonprofits and like people who are doing events and things like that, is that making sure the information is available in an easily consumable, that will that'll make the difference. So I hope that helps. Okay, so I will work on adapting this a bit. All right, so this is definitely still applicable. So hashtags and keywords, think of these as unlocking viewership. So if you are, the hashtags are searchable on Google. So having a branded hashtag, which for a nonprofit or for an event would be a hashtag specific to the event, means that you can say, hey, when you guys come to this event and you take a picture, use this hashtag, and then you can actually just pull all of those posts. And that's now user generated content, which helps with content marketing. You'll also be able to showcase who was there. Another way to use hashtags is if you want to have geo specific. So for your specific park, your specific recreational facility, the town you're in, those will all push your post up in the algorithm. So people who are physically in, I'm going to use my town, physically in Butler, if I use the Butler hashtag for my co-working space, my posts will get shown to people who are following that Butler hashtag. And it is randomized, but it will show up in that. The other thing is I sort of mentioned the keywords. So keywords for making your websites more searchable means that when someone uses that search bar to find a specific event, they'll be able to find it better. So keywords on a website can be used in tags if you're using blog posts. Categories are searchable, really any text. Those are the two main searchable areas. And I'm not going to go into different website platforms where they are. But any keywords can go in as tags on posts and pages, and that will make things much more searchable and pull up. So this goes back to the throwing pebbles. There's no right way to do any of this. It's a lot of experimentation. It's a lot of figuring it out when it comes to doing events, especially free ones. People have a lower, I don't know, there's lower commitment if it's a free event. So if 100 people register an event and only 15 show up and it was free, if you'd charged $5, maybe more people would have come, but it just depends on what the event is. And sometimes we don't want that many people. So thinking about how you're doing your marketing, where you're marketing, will help you figure out who's most likely to show up, who's the most engaged. And this is kind of where your email list comes in. If you have an active email list, the people who are opening things more, who click on things more, those are all people that are more likely to come to an event. So when you send an email out, looking at your analytics on that email list will help up your open rate and will probably help that commitment rate for events and volunteerism, which is like that's a whole other thing. But testing, figuring out what's working by following your analytics will help you figure out which way to actually go. As an accidental marketer, it is sometimes really hard to figure out how you're supposed to talk, which colors you're supposed to use, fonts. This is really going into graphics and into word choice. So even as a nonprofit, and actually as a nonprofit, most will have a brand voice guide, whether you know it or not. Usually it happens in the early stages. So I would ask someone in your organization if there was something when the company started, if they went through and did a mission, all of those things go into a brand voice guide. And for you on a tactical level, we're looking for a really quick and easy reference for words that your brand would use if they were talking to someone, the colors you would use in Canva, the types of fonts, and just having that listed out so it's a real quick, easy reference guide so you aren't constantly going, oh, what was that thing? Oh, what was that other thing? And digging around in Canva trying to find a different design. If you're not in something like Canva, this is even more important. If you are using Canva for graphics, even on the free version, I'm pretty sure I know you have the option to still set colors. I don't think you can upload custom fonts. On the pro version, you can upload custom fonts if that's something that you're doing. If you're a part of, I just don't know how the branding works. So usually, like I know with franchises and stuff, the branding is consistent across every place. So chances are somewhere up the chain, if you are part of a larger organization, there is something like a brand voice guide somewhere. Someone has laid out, these are our marketing guidelines, and be sure you're using those. So using your resources wisely. As a company, you have an enormous amount of resources. So if you feel like you've been spending a lot of time trying to find the right image or trying to find the right thing, ask someone around you. as a collective, you can create company-based generated content. Dan has a beautiful photo behind him right now that is an example of user-generated content that's totally on brand and fabulous. So if you want people to go outside, go take more pictures outside and post those, and encourage team members, colleagues to do that. I know here in Butler, there's the newspaper has a submit your photo thing. I know there's a couple other organizations locally that have that. So encouraging people to submit user-generated photos will take the burden off of your content creation, and you'll be able to use those. Just make sure you're getting photo releases and permissions and all of those things that you can use it in the content. Okay, so following complementary brands. So for this application, I don't think of anyone as a competitor. So even if you have a nonprofit that's like one zip code over from you and you guys are doing the same thing, you are literally marketing to different people because it's probably location specific. But I would, look a couple zip codes over and see what's that place doing over there? What's working over there? What words did they use? Which graphics got the most most engagement? And look at your own analytics as well. Inside Facebook and Instagram, you have access to those analytics. On Facebook, you can actually follow, I call them complementary. So complementary brands, and you'll be able to see what their top posts were like in the last 28 days or something. So it's just looking to see what other people are doing. I don't advocate for copying what people are doing, but think about how it would apply to who you're talking to, where you are, and what that could look like on your own platforms. The biggest thing I see people do is that they just continue to create new content, and repurposing content with a plan is literally life-changing. As I said before, I don't think I actually said spaghetti, but I also think of marketing as kind of like we're sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see which pieces stick. And your analytics will tell you which pieces of spaghetti stuck to the wall. And those are the things you can confidently repurpose that will continue to get you the same outcomes. So if the call to action worked really well, if you got the signups and the people showed up, the repurposing content with a plan comes back to deciding what success looks like, which I don't think I've said yet, but deciding what success looks like for that event, that piece of content, that email, and from a campaign perspective, what is the goal at the end of the campaign? Is it that you have more people on the list that are engaging? Is it that you had a really great donor season? Did you have a great fundraising event? And see which content helped get you to that end success goal if you made it. And if you didn't, go back and see what actually worked in there and try to repurpose those pieces. Okay. Chat. Questions. Keep clicking buttons.
Gail?
Yes?
I had an excellent question from Ryan. He says, what are the pros and cons between keeping branding the same versus switching it up for social media marketing?
I think I need more clarity around what you mean by switching branding.
All right. He said he could explain. Ryan, you want to go ahead and get on?
Or because I'm not a social media expert by trade. With the global pandemic, we started a Recreation and Home series where we're providing a lot of content on multiple platforms, specifically our Reading with Recreation series. So we kind of do a template with, the cover of the book and different fonts. And we kind of change it up every couple books. So my question was more, and the reason for that from our perspective of looking at it, not being experts, is if we put up the same thumbnail or same graphic, people are going to get tired and it's going to grow stale. So our thought was to switch up a little bit every couple of weeks to keep it fresh, but it seems like that's counterproductive to what we're hearing here. So I just wanted to dive into it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so Brian, can you mute? Sorry. Thank you. I just could hear feedback. So this is where that brand voice guide comes in, because from what I'm hearing, you didn't change the brand. You guys did a pivot and found new ways to, like, you changed how you were using the content. And that part, that isn't necessarily off brand. I think off brand would be if everything was blue, green, and orange, and then you decided to start using purple in April, unless it was very specific. Like, that is, that's kind of a little crazy. But making a pivot like that, I think, is amazing. It sounds like it's still on brand, and I wouldn't get too hung up on the book covers. Like, change the book covers. What I've done with I have a company called The Legacy Recorder, and I had to do a massive pivot because everything I had created was based on volunteers being able to go into care facilities, and they couldn't do that anymore. So I've spent the last 12 months pivoting everything. And when I started doing my book covers for at-home journals, I actually I found a template I liked, and then I just went through and changed the cover colors. So I'm trying to use the same font. So staying on brand can be using the same font, the way the graphic is created, the way the text placement is, adding your logo to it, and those are all ways to stay, within the branding, without, um, you know, does that help? Before I keep talking.
Yeah.
No, that does help a lot in terms of it. We're doing this kind of, I think, like everyone, on the fly, and an uptick in how much we use social media. So got a little bit of feedback that when we weren't doing the pivot, that things started to get stale, and you would see page likes or the reach go down. So I was just curious of the difference, which makes sense, and it was perfectly clear on what the difference between pivoting and that branding. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Another thing to do is maybe look at what types of content you're creating. So if you have the books, maybe it's someone like visibly reading a chapter out of the book as a video, or doing an audio version of like chapter 1. Maybe I actually have made, there's programs where you can make flip books. So it looks like a video and you're like flipping the pages. I can't remember what it's called. So there's something called Flowdesk, and there's a free version. You can get like the first 10 pages of the book. Another way is actually just doing a Loom video walkthrough of the PDF of the book, and just trying to showcase, maybe what the book is without just posting the cover all the time. Finding different ways to have people engage with the content. If it's got pictures in it, like doing a flip picture book on a story might be fun. And that might be actually good content for reels too on Instagram. So do we have another question, Dan?
Well, Shayna just mentioned that she created the brand color font guide by just basing everything on what the website featured.
Yeah.
And that way, if it's a free website, it's got a limited number of fonts and colors, you're in, I guess. And
Yeah.
the one thing I would add is here at PRPS, I mean, we cling to our logo, which was redesigned a couple of years ago, but we have a color guide. And so we just created a health and wellness initiative, and it's going to have its own logo, but we're going to use the same fonts and colors to make that all mesh together. So I think that's another way to accomplish things.
Definitely. Yeah, font. So if you're looking at your website and you find that your organization doesn't have a color guide or brand guide, there's a Chrome extension called, I think it's called What Font. And Dan and I will go through and make a resource list of everything I mentioned. But What Font is a Chrome extension, and it'll actually show you, once you have it enabled, it'll actually show you the font without having to look at the code on the website for each font. And then there's a color picker. I think it's just called color picker. I need to find the right one. And that'll actually, you can pick a color out of any image that's on a website or on a website itself. So that would be one way to snag your info. It's also in the code if you know how to go in and do inspect element. all of the, that all of that's listed in there too in the code. Talked about those things. Okay. Any other questions in the chat?
I think that's it.
Okay, fabulous. All right, workflows. This is where I get nerdy and fun, and this will most likely be applicable without too much trouble. So one thing on branding, though, I have 1, 2, 3. I technically have 3 brands. So I have a common color through all 3 brands, which is like basically there's always a dark blue or a very dark purple. And I haven't used the same font because they are pretty distinct brands. One way to distinguish content and branding and words is, I can't imagine any of you actually using curse words in your branding, but sometimes there's actually a no list on words we don't use. And sometimes that's easier to come up with than words you want to use. So just something that popped into my head. Okay, workflow. So I like focusing on free tools. So my first suggestion is using something called Airtable. I'm pretty sure they have a pretty epic nonprofit option that you can go check into, but I've been using it for a couple of years now, and I still am on the unpaid free version. So I use it for a whole ton of things, but what I wanted to share with you today specifically for the marketing part was using it as an editorial calendar. And usually when people hear editorial calendar, they kind of freak out. But think of your editorial calendar as like just a quick, a 10,000 foot view of all of your content pieces. For you guys, it's probably, especially for retail based, for event based, you're looking at, in Pennsylvania, you're looking at the weather. What can people actually do? Talking about sunshine in December is kind of cruel. And talking about snow in May is kind of silly. So, you guys are probably already doing this, but using something like Airtable and creating your organizational hub in it means that everyone can see what's going on. And if a supervisor comes and says, hey, what did we post on that one day, or what are we posting next month? I want to add this other thing in, and you can see really quickly at a glance. I'm not going to go too crazy into how it actually works, but I did want to point out that these are called views. So the screenshot I took was a list, because this is usually how I build first. And these are, I just threw in blog post ideas. I grabbed the Google Doc link. If you have someone you can delegate to on your team, this is a great way to gather all the thoughts in your head and from all of your teammates, and then actually be able to delegate out to the person who actually writes the things. You can also view it as a calendar, which is pretty awesome. I actually have it integrated to my Google Calendar. So I don't even have to come open Airtable. I can open my Google Calendar and see what I'm supposed to be doing that day, which is kind of fun. So one way is the editorial calendar. I also use it for creating events and event registrations, because it has a built-in form function. And it's all, you can integrate it with Zapier, you can integrate it with Gmail. There's like a whole bunch of different things. And I still think that's still on the free plan. It's pretty freaking epic. So I can see the chat going crazy. So we will totally get to questions. Is there anything, Dan, specific to this right now while we're sitting here?
No, we just, there was a plug for Airtable, and I put in the URL for it.
Good. Okay, cool. All right. So the next thing is utilizing Google Drive. So if you aren't using Google Drive, sorry, this isn't for you, but in Outlook, depending on which thing you're using for email, lots of different, like Outlook has its own version. So this will work in OneDrive. I just like to think of creating digital filing cabinets. And if you build your digital filing cabinet with, wait for it, keywords and things you'll remember, you don't have to remember where that one document was in that one place. You can use the search bar in Google Drive or in OneDrive and type in the thing you're looking for, and it'll pull up. This comes back to naming conventions. So when you're actually naming your documents, it can get quite long if you are, have too many things. But like, let's use an event for an example. If you have, it's like event name, what it is, and the date, or like the date it was created or the date it's for. So, outdoor skiing, and it's the flyer or it's the Facebook graphic or something. And it was for February 2021. Like, think about how you're naming things, so that when you do try to use it as a digital filing cabinet, it actually works. There's nothing worse than trying to remember what you named something. I also do the same thing with folders. So most of these folders that you're seeing have folders within folders. And that helps with if you need to add sharing permissions for one level of folders, that makes it easier later to be able to delegate and give access to what people need to have access to without giving them everything. This is the Galix brand has a very small amount. My legacy digital filing cabinet is enormous. I have at least 30 top level folders just because I've been working in it for so long. So that is the digital filing cabinet, Google Drive. So when you are doing copy, naming conventions, anything, clear is always better than clever. So coming up with fun names is awesome, but if your reader, viewer, person you want to come to your event isn't sure what it is and they have to decide what it is, they're less likely to commit because of that decision tree. So when in doubt, just cut it out and do something simpler. Isn't that fun? I like the Golden Gate Bridge because I was born in San Francisco. I thought it was a neat photo. Okay, here's the other thing that people freak out about. You don't have to be on every platform to be successful. To know which platforms to be on, you should probably decide what success looks like, which we talked a little bit about already, and understanding where people are. I'm going to use Legacy as an example. So the Legacy Recorder, I figured out about 4 years ago. The Legacy Recorder probably should be a nonprofit, full disclosure. It's not, because I wanted to run it as a social enterprise. But it's basically free resources for people to start storytelling conversations in really hard moments. So I figured out about 4 years ago that people who are really looking for that information were on Pinterest. So all of my content creation is focused on Pinterest first and then trickles down to everywhere else. So my repurposing plan is what worked on Pinterest and then creating more content from that. And that's what goes on Instagram, the blog, onto YouTube, and everywhere else. So I pay attention to which platforms are getting me the most ROI. And for me, the ROI, my goal was for email capture and lead capture. So I repurpose and reuse content that got me more of those things. And for you, it might be different. So if your goal for a campaign is likes or more engagement, see which posts got more engagement on that platform, and then test things out on other platforms. Okay, too many clicking. So social media is an important part of your SEO recipe, and it's not the only thing you need. So I won't go too far into SEO, but lots of people hear about SEO and how important it is, and it is super important. Social media, if you think of, let me go back to SEO. So if you think of SEO as like, it's how everything talks to each other. And really everything starts with your website. So if you think of your website as the center of like a wagon wheel, and then every social media channel is a spoke out of that wagon, the middle of that wagon wheel. And then the internet is that circling, all those people circling around on the outside, and then they slide in on those little spokes going into your website. Each prong, each spoke is a social media channel. It's a post, it's a thing. And the idea, I imagine, is normally it's getting people back to the website, or it's getting them to a registration page. So for SEO to work, specifically with a website, The website needs to continue to be updated. Social channels need to continue to be updated in order for places like Google and Bing and wherever else to actually send you traffic. Because basically we're essentially putting out our hand, putting out our content and saying, please, please send us people, unless you're actually doing paid advertising, which is a different conversation. But just the bottom line on this is that SEO is important, but if you aren't continuing to update things, throwing money at it isn't going to make a difference. That's what I wanted to point out.
Gail, can I
Yes.
stop you for a minute?
Of course.
I'm curious, maybe I missed it. What does SEO stand for?
Oh, search engine optimization.
Search engine optimization. Okay.
And
And
I
I do
spelled out
know,
call to action, but not SEO. Sorry.
no, we got it. We got it. Then I did have two questions about postings.
Sure.
Real quick, should we spread out our communications? In other words, if we post on Facebook, should we wait to run the same post on Instagram and send out an email yet another day? And can you post the same thing on Facebook, Instagram, and put it in an email? Is that okay?
So, I'm not going to say it depends. So for the same posting, I'm going to tell you what I do, because my goal is to get people to engage with me on Pinterest, and then maybe they find me on Instagram. So my goal is to keep Instagram and Facebook updated so that when someone goes there, they know it's active. What happened at some point along the way is that people will still go to Google, but your page has a higher chance of being found on Facebook. So someone might go, hey, I heard about this one place. So they go to search for your page. You just want to keep it updated. So my answer is that yes, you can post the same thing on Instagram and Facebook. Just keep in mind that if your Facebook post has click the link in bio, it doesn't mean anything on Facebook. So you either need to schedule separately or just go in and edit afterwards. I am lazy and I go in and I edit afterwards. But you can, if you have the time, schedule separately and you definitely can use stuff in the email. If you think of I like to use the email list as almost a VIP list. Like my email list gets to hear about things before it goes out on social. And sometimes I use the email list as a recap, like, hey, this is what was on the blog this week. Here's this thing that's coming up that I want you to know about first. And then and I tell people that on social media. So I'll often post things first in the email, because for me, it's easier to write the email because I know who I'm writing to. And then I use that content and repurpose it onto Instagram and Facebook. For the actual different days, it's up to you. If you're pushing for an event, no way. Like you just put it at the same time. Because sometimes people are on Instagram, but they're not on Facebook. And the number of people who are on both platforms that will actually see both posts at the same times is pretty minuscule. And if someone gets upset, they can unfollow you. It's really more about understanding when users are on. So you could sometimes, depending on what it is, I'll usually post to Instagram first, and then maybe I'll post to Facebook 4 days later, and it's the exact same content. I used to do that. I think right now what I'm doing is actually I just post to both. So I hope that helped. Dan, you're muted.
I think it did. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And did we have any other questions, do we think?
Not that I see right now.
Okay, awesome. We are almost done. So consistency and engagement is really where it counts. So consistently posting and then coming back and engaging. So it's not really a set it and forget it. You absolutely use the scheduling tools. I advocate for that furiously, but remember to come back and actually engage. I actually go into each profile to actually look, because I have a problem now where I have so many notifications, I don't actually see when people engage with me. So I actually have time set aside on my calendar where I go in and I look to see who shared. I go and I thank them for sharing. I go and try and like some of their posts. Another thing to be looking at, especially on Facebook, is having, well, and on Instagram, but following what I call supplementary brands and accounts. So those are ones that are serving the same audience you are in another way. So I'm going to use the airport as the example. So maybe what would be a supplementary for you? I don't know. This is a really big one, but someone who made their plane, like, anyone who's providing services in your facility, right down to, the electric company, following those accounts. Anyone you have an existing business relationship with, those are good accounts to follow and also engage with. So all the things we talked about really had to do with working smarter and not harder and building a good foundation. Having those foundational pieces will make everything else so much easier. And what I think is really neat about this stuff is that finding little ways to make your process go a little bit faster gives you more brain space to get creative with the content so that things don't feel old, that you're not bored. And I think for, myself included, when it comes to marketing, we feel like we are shouting the same things into the same void, and people must be tired of hearing us, and they probably haven't heard you yet. So it takes a bunch of times for someone to actually get the message. And with the way the algorithms change and how they change the feeds, sometimes people aren't seeing things for 2 days on Facebook. So if you have an event that's coming up, just, keep doing it. And don't be afraid to, just don't be afraid to get loud. And don't be afraid to try new things. If you feel like things are bored, throw some more spaghetti, and track your analytics, for heaven's sakes. It's so important to go back in and if you tried something new and a supervisor's like, why did we do that? Nobody liked it. Sometimes it's because, on your platform, I've seen some brands where graphics do amazing and videos do terrible, or videos do amazing and graphics do terrible, or it was because there was a link in the post or something. And that's how finicky these platforms are. And it has nothing to do with the person who wants to see your content. So just try new things, throw spaghetti, and track your analytics. Ta-da! So what now is talk to your people. Find out, see who your resources are. Maybe someone loves writing things. Maybe someone loves taking pictures, but no one's ever asked them because they're not in your department. See what cross-department conversations you can have to help everyone make help make that marketing a whole world and a whole community process, and then make a plan. I think I'm huge on project management and planning, so I always tell people to make a plan, even if it's what you're going to do, tomorrow, to try to do one thing more. And then Dan's going to do his wrap up. But I do have an automations workshop coming up. I'm running it at the last week of March. It'll be 5 45-minute sessions every day, Monday through Friday. You can go to gaelix.com/automations and get information on that. It's pretty epic. It's the second time I'm running it, and I'm very, very excited. So we'll cover a bunch of the tools I talked about today, way more in depth, and how to actually create workflows and processes and create automations that'll make your job easier. So that is me.
Gail, thank you. We have a few more questions if you have
Sure.
time.
Absolutely.
Let's see. What are the best times of day to post for high engagement?
You need to go look at your analytics. That's the answer. And it depends on what your specific event is. It depends on, so if you're marketing to people who are in the Eastern time zone, I can tell you that they are probably opening emails between 7 and 8 in the morning. They might have more time to leisurely scroll through Facebook and Instagram over their lunch period, which could be anywhere from 11 to 1. And then that 4 to 6 p.m. period, and then like 8 to 10-ish, depending on your demographic. So it's a combination of demographic, if they're working. One thing I figured out with Legacy is that I couldn't run lunchtime webinars because I was trying to target, I was targeting activity staff and nurses, and they had availability at night, not necessarily, and then the night shifters couldn't. So then it was trying to find, so really go in and look at your analytics. Facebook does a really good job of telling you when people are most engaged. Instagram also has that. Legacy or LinkedIn, not so much, but I wouldn't, just think business hours mostly for LinkedIn. The other way to do it is to ask, sitting in that seat of your brain, of that customer brain, and see, when do you usually, if you're potentially a user of the thing you are marketing or you wanted to go to that event, when were you looking at Facebook? When were you looking at Instagram? And play around with it. And I would just test it out.
Okay. Another question. You're always mentioning Instagram and Facebook.
Yes.
Is Twitter dead?
So no, Twitter is not dead, but Twitter is its own animal. And so Twitter is like, I use Twitter to connect with other people in the same spaces. So I can tell you there is a huge genealogy community. Twitter has lots of communities and it is all driven by hashtags. From in my experience, I know people that will, people usually, if I post a buy link on Twitter, it usually will sell something. So Twitter is really great for live events. If you can have a live, people live tweeting at your event, that's really, like, for conferences, it's really good. So like right now, for instance, we could have been using Twitter to talk about being an accidental marketer and sharing things that I shared and sharing questions that people asked and sharing out, different things. So having to shift to virtual kind of changed how people were using Twitter, but it's definitely not dead. One thing you can do as a nonprofit, and the airport one would be really fun, but doing a tweet chat. So there's things called tweet chats if you haven't checked those out yet. Those usually are a brand inviting someone that they come interview, and then everyone can actually chime in with the questions. I could do a whole webinar just on tweet chats, but really, like, try searching for hashtags that you think your users are searching for. I can't comment on how many people you'll actually find. I know if I had a business in Pittsburgh, I would be using Twitter more. So for me, geographically, having my co-working space on Twitter and being active on Twitter isn't as beneficial for me as it is being active on Instagram. So it's meeting people where they are. So if you're in a larger city, chances are you'll have more people who are using Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Another question. Since many of us are governmental entities, are there any recommendations or templates regarding rules of engagement on social media for us?
I would say that your organization probably has that, I hope. And if they don't have something that says social media, I would look at what they already have established for how you communicate with people in person. I'm trying to remember trying to think of what the document would be called. Maybe even just going back to your handbook. Like if there was an employee handbook you read, there might be some like guidelines on communication in there. But if your organization doesn't have that, from a template perspective, I have to imagine that there is stuff out there. I don't know, maybe Dan, we can look for that. I don't have a thing off the top of my head.
I remember when I worked in a school, we were not allowed to post and do a personal post and identify ourselves as a member of the school organization.
Right. So there's going to be, especially so I can say from Girl Scouts, because I'm a Girl Scout volunteer and I kind of know those things, and being in the service unit, being really careful about posting pictures of kids, making sure you have permissions of things. I just don't do that in general. And I think a lot of it is going to be, I hate to say common sense, but whatever you think is a standard, go 2 steps above that and then start there. So, because if you're dealing with HIPAA stuff, that's a whole other kit and caboodle. I would encourage you to start a conversation with your organization if you don't have written protocols, and find like a complementary brand and maybe reach out, especially if they're in a different state, that are doing the same thing you're doing, and say, hey, we're trying to sort this out. Do you have any suggestions? And most times people will share.
Okay. There is one last question. I'm going to put my screen on here, but the last question is, what is automations?
Oh,
What are automations?
so automations are, I think of them a couple different ways, but a really short explanation is ways that you can shorten the amount of time you spend on a task, and how you can get different systems to talk to each other. So I use something called Zapier to get information, say in Airtable, that someone fills out in a form, and then it sends it over to somewhere else where I need it. For the co-working space, I actually have it set up so that when someone pays and becomes a member, they automatically, I have an automation set up where they get sent a welcome email with a member agreement, and they get auto added to my Slack channel, and I never have to touch any of it. So that saves me about 20 minutes per person.
Right.
So it's making your workflows faster and more fun to do, in my opinion.
Okay, Shauna, in regards to the last question, says talk to your solicitor about open record concerns when it comes to posting comments. So that's very, very solid advice there.
Yes. Talk to lawyers.
There is a question at the very bottom, Gail, if you want to read through that. And then while I talk, I want to just give people who need to leave for one reason or another the opportunity. Thank you for attending. Special thanks to Gail for her presentation. I've given you the web addresses and her email address if you want to reach her. I've also put those in the chat box if you want to just grab them there. Again, the webinar has been approved for 1.1 CEU or 1 contact hour. Please follow the link here or on the chat box to take the quiz. The chat box link obviously will take you right there. You will have to enter that address into your browser line to get it if you're watching a recorded session. However, after successfully passing the quiz, a notice of completion will be emailed to you from PRPS. So, Gail, you want to answer that last question, or is that just the information?
I can't see it.
We are in the process of developing a social media policy. I reached out to other townships to get information and was pointed toward the lawyer
I think it's information.
using to develop it. Okay. Well, that seems to be the end of the questions, and I notice we're over our time. So, Gail, I want to give you, again, loads of thanks. It was an informative, there was a lot of stuff there. I learned a lot, so thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Again, please go to the SurveyMonkey site if you need that in-service credit. But until then, I would like everybody to be safe and be warm. Okay? All right, I'm going to give you a couple of